Welcome back. Please help me welcome Jeffrey Bell. Hi.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. This is Clymer Conversations. It is Tuesday, the 26th of January, and I am so excited to have writer, director, executive producer, His Eminence, Jeffrey Bell, joining us today.
Or just Jeff.
Oh, sure. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I see behind you a poster that really helped shape my viewing for many years on television. Scully and Mulder, two of my favorite characters that ever graced the screen. I want to believe.
Yes. I was fortunate. X-Files is the first job I had in television. And, I too went to believe and spent 3 seasons there. And there was an episode where Mulder, his office had burned up and that poster burned up. And then later in like season 6, he met someone who also had that poster, and she ended up giving it to him. And I wrote that. So I made sure that when they were printing up posters, they printed up an extra one. And so in my little office here, it's, all writers keep little, mementos, swag from different shows, but that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's kind of the coolest trophy that you can take away from an assignment. But that kind of kickstarted you in a very genre-specific world. You've done some of the most incredible television, like groundbreaking television.
Well, I worked for groundbreaking people. Let's put it that way. I was really fortunate. My first job was working for Chris Carter at X-Files, and that did sort of make me genre guy. And so I went from there to work for Joss Whedon at Angel, and I ran that for a couple of years. And from that, I went over to Alias and worked for JJ on that. And so those were the first 3 jobs I had, which was, pretty great training. And then, did a bunch of other shows that I'm proud of. Some of them didn't last very long, some of them went longer. And then I spent the last 7 years co-running Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on ABC.
I'm sorry, what show?
Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Never heard of it.
Never heard of it.
No.
It was a little web show we had.
Yeah, right. That show took one of the most beloved characters from the Marvel Universe and gave him a platform on television in people's homes that I think is a more intimate space than what the superheroes in the movie theaters occupy.
I agree completely. Clark Gregg played Agent Phil Coulson in the movies. He was in the first Iron Man, a couple Iron Men. He got to meet Thor, and then he got killed in the first Avengers. And
in a way that totally devastates you emotionally.
Because Joss said, I've got good news and bad news for you. The good news is you're the guy who brings the team together to win the day. The bad news is you die doing it. And I don't think he was that flippant about it, but that's the way we think of that story. And then
so tell us, for those that are watching, tell us that scene, because it is.
Well, the Avengers, for a big part of the movie, are a bunch of whiny, spoiled superheroes who all have their own interests at heart. And as aliens are attacking, and they can't really seem to get it together, and they all have their own agenda. And the one human, the one person without real powers in it, who just the power. We always talk that Coulson's superpower was his ability to talk. He could talk anybody into just about anything. But as the bad guy Loki, shoves a spear into his back and kills him, that sort of brings everyone together to rally behind that and to save Earth, as we like to do.
And in that moment, in his breast pocket, he's got a Captain America baseball card.
He does. And because he worshipped Cap, and so when Cap came back, and so blood on the baseball card on the trading card was yes, copious tears for all, and so then later because in Marvel the joke is you're never really dead in Marvel, And Joss and Jeff Loeb, who ran Marvel Television, came up with a way to bring him back, or said, "We think you're not dead." And then we took that ball and ran with it for 7 seasons.
And not just on television, you guys had an incredible digital marketing campaign. What that cast was able to do on social media, I think, transformed how like legitimate production utilized that platform.
Well, I'll give Jeffrey Colo, who I know is a board member there at the MPTF, a lot. He was our transmedia producer on the show, and we were just coming up at the time when Twitter and Instagram were really sort of taking it, and we had a young, hideous-looking cast that were just terrible at being online, and they really embraced that. And so I think all that was very helpful to the success of the show.
I have to say, your sarcasm and sense of humor so aligns with me, and we're not even 10 minutes into this conversation, and I just want to go and hang out and have a cup of tea with you.
Well, come on over. We'll sit 6 feet apart and pretend that.
Excellent. Double mask.
Yeah.
How does a young man from Indiana find himself writing snarky dialogue in Hollywood?
Ask Ryan Murphy. I mean, he's from Indianapolis.
Thanks for your time, Jeff.
Yeah, goodbye. I grew up loving movies, and there was actually, outside of Indianapolis, there was a small town called Carmel, not Carmel, because we're Indiana. And it had this, in the strip mall, it had the Woodland Theater 1 and 2. And it somehow in the middle of Indiana, there was this repertory theater that was playing art house movies, foreign movies. And I stumbled upon those and just fell in love. And I also, loved Woody Allen before he became controversial. Annie Hall is one of my all-time favorite movies. And just as a Baptist boy from Indiana laughing at sort of New York Jewish humor, I went, there's a world beyond these walls. Mm-hmm. And so when I had a chance, I came out and went to film school at UCLA and never left. But I've loved movies my whole life, and I've loved genre stories my whole life, but also independent film. And just, I wasn't particularly interested in television when I first started. I wanted to be like everybody else, because I was coming of age when Spike Lee and Steve Soderbergh and Jim Jarmusch were making independent films, and UCLA was all about independent films. Mm-hmm. And TV wasn't quite what it is today. And when I had a chance to pitch stories to Chris Carter, because the X-Files was an exception to how I felt about that, and I had a chance to work on it, I had no idea how spectacular TV was. I mean, I fell in love with it immediately. As a guy who likes to do everything, you get to do that in television. So as a showrunner, you write episodes, if you're inclined, you can direct, but to be in post and visual effects and music and be on set, I've been fortunate that I think 6 or 7 of the shows I've worked on have all been here in Los Angeles. So I really got to experience that. And I just fell in love with television. It just, it's been a really good career. I realized, I got a notice from somebody that my very first episode of X-File aired like a week ago, 22 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And first off, how was 22 years possible? But that was a humble reminder how quickly it goes. And I think, it had like 24 million viewers because it was a big show, and that was kind of normal at the time. And it's just interesting how much the world has changed even the last 5 years.
Yeah. I'm sure you do. What was the plot of your first X-Files? Because certainly, if this was before TiVo, it was before DVR. Right. If you were a fan of this show, there were so many twists and turns. There were moments that if you didn't watch it live on Friday, right? Am I wrong?
No, you were right. It was one of the great zeitgeist shows. It was Lost became that years later, but it was on Friday nights before they moved to Sunday nights. But that was the water cooler show. you talk about on Mondays. I had no idea. I mean, I knew I loved it, but I had no idea what a zeitgeisty thing it was, because you would meet somebody and they would say, "What do you do?" I say, "I work in television." And they go, "What show?" I say, "I work for the X-Files." And it could be a 10-year-old boy, it could be a 60-year-old woman. And if they were a fan, it was just like full Looney Tunes, Chuck Jones response. And that was pretty great. That was, I was, a writer just the last I did 3 seasons on it, but to be part of that was pretty special. Answering your question, my first episode, I think, is a bit polarizing because it was kind of a romantic comedy where there wasn't a big body count. It wasn't super scary. There were lots of twists and turns, but there was a guy in Kansas who emotions controlled the weather, and he had unrequited love for this woman, and so it would hail, heart-shaped hail, and we think it's this one guy, and it's the guy she loves, but in fact it's the weatherman, and then it all flips when the woman that he loves realizes, "Oh, I don't love this guy over here, I love Mulder." And so once she falls in love with Mulder, there's snow, there's hail, there's tornadoes, and at the end, they're worried about having to build an ark. And I think meanwhile, the guy who loves or turns to Mulder for, "You're clearly a man of the world. Can you give me advice on how women think?" And clearly Mulder was like the last person on the planet who could do that. And so I think some fans felt I was making fun of Mulder and Scully in a way that wasn't appropriate. Then other people really loved it. So,
Yeah,
the Rain King.
I do remember that episode, and I did love it, but I also love those kinds of twists and turns, and I'm big on the romantic comedy as well.
Yeah.
And I do want to get to an incredible thing that you've done more recently to help and aid MPTF and find out how you found out about MPTF. But before we do that, Jim Jarmusch, not somebody that I hear referenced terribly, terribly often, but an incredible filmmaker. And like Mystery Train is one of my favorite films. Yeah. And I can see the tie-in with X-Files and.
Yeah, there was just sort of a drawl. I mean, one of my favorite moments is in his first movie, and they all go up to Lake Erie to see how beautiful it is, and it's just completely fogged in, and the woman visiting just goes, "It's so beautiful." And so anytime I go somewhere with friends and there's nothing, you hope something great's going to happen, and it's nothing. It's so beautiful. And then not too long ago, he made a vampire movie called The Last Lovers Alive, I think it's called, and it was beautiful. It was set in Morocco and Detroit, and Tilda Swinton and Loki himself starred in it, and it was beautiful. So anyway, I've always liked indie films, and it's just so hard to see those these days, because of.
All right, so let's talk about MPTF.
Sure.
How you heard about us, and then this incredible opportunity that you have created to inform more people specifically about what we're doing around COVID.
Right. I've known about MPTF just because I'm in the business. I have friends who have, done things. I have one friend who always jokes he's going to retire. He's going to retire to campus, and he'll be writing an email, and as he's writing it, he'll go, "Oh, hey, Carol," like he's waving to Carol Burnett, or "Hey," and he always references like old movie stars and TV stars as if he's hanging out with them, because in his fantasy that would be the perfect way to retire. But Jeffrey Colo, who I mentioned, I think is on the board there, and when I came up with this idea, because he was our transmedia producer, Jeffrey was the first person I called to say, "Is this a viable idea?" Because when I first did it, was like, well, I have so many, those in the business know below the line is not a disparaging comment. I had so many friends who worked gig to gig, and folks on S.H.I.E.L.D. who hadn't been working, and so how can we support those people? And when I talked to him, he said, actually, all the guilds have been channeling that through the MPTF. And it's sort of a one-stop shop where, DGA, Writers Guild, SAG-AFTRA, and IATSE can all do that. And I thought that was genius. And so he reached out to you guys to see if this would be something you'd be interested in. Kind of, I think, pitch the idea. And there was like, yes, we'd be interested in that. And so that was really that was when I thought, okay, this is possible. The idea for people who don't know is, what if Batman lost everything to COVID? And so he hired a French film crew to help him shoot a GoFundMe page to raise $320 million. And that's in a nutshell what it was. And so when he thought that would be good, I then called Jeff Ward, who was one of the actors on S.H.I.E.L.D, because I had really written it for him. And then when he said yes, I just started figuring out what we had to do to shoot it in a safe manner. We shot this back in September, when things weren't quite as on fire. And so we came up with, we sort of followed the industry protocols that had been set up. Everybody got tested. Everybody wore masks. And our joke was Batman was wearing a mask too. It was just the wrong half. Mm-hmm. And so we shot it back in September.
So it's called Fund the Bat.
It's called Fund the Bat.
If you're like watching this right now and you're like, I got to find out what exactly they're talking about.
Right.
Fund the Bat. And for me, watching it the very first time, knowing Jeffrey Colo is on our Next Gen board and he's helping to cultivate new relationships and get younger people in the industry aware of what MPTF has been doing for 100 years.
Right.
To watch this piece that is over the top, which again, I love. And to hear Batman say, yeah, my butler no longer with me. They gave me Wayne Enterprises and I kind of ran it into the ground. And then to have this ridiculous goal of $325 million. Yeah. It was fun to be able to laugh in a time that is so dark. And we know from all of the incredible help that we've been able to give to people in the industry, this is the first year we have helped more people under the age of 65 than over the age of 65. Our social workers took 140% higher intake calls this past year because of COVID.
Wow.
And that is not stopping. The work has not resumed to full force. Right. But when you guys were creating this in September, a lot of the, first gush of wind that we had in our sales had already depleted.
Right.
So the gift of Fund the Bat for me was the knowledge that there were still people creative with the foresight that this is not over and our industry is still in desperate need. And as ridiculous as 325 million sounds, that's like, we should keep striving for that.
We should.
So far, not hundreds, but thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars have been raised. There are still a few $1,000s left to go for what the actual goal on the GoFundMe page is. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Sure.
As much as Batman would like to replenish his fortune to $320 million, we thought in this, it's a tough fundraising time, especially pre-election. Everyone was, I know that I got 20 emails a day from different people asking for money. And so we set what we thought was a realistic but significant goal of raising $25,000, and we're currently just over $15,000. And so, part of the hope of doing it was to get people beyond folks in the business. And so when we first put it out there, all the actors on S.H.I.E.L.D. tweeted about it or put on their Instagram, and because we wanted fans to be able to say thank you for all this. And so a lot of that money came from S.H.I.E.L.D. fans. I had really hoped it would move beyond just S.H.I.E.L.D. fans, because I also thought it was funny that we had an entirely S.H.I.E.L.D. crew. Everybody on the show had worked on S.H.I.E.L.D. Pre-production, production, post-production. Panavision gave us camera. Arsenal Post did all the dailies and finished it for us. They were all super generous with that. Western Costume gave us a break. So everybody really stepped up, but I thought it was funny that everybody who'd been in the Marvel universe was working together to kind of lovingly spoof a DC Batman.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sort of hoped we would transcend S.H.I.E.L.D. fans and get out to a wider audience, but that really hasn't happened the way I had hoped. But within the industry, there's been, a lot of support.
And I do think that what you'd said before is right. The election took a lot of focus off of any other charitable fundraising.
Anything.
Yes.
But I mean, there were children waiting for dinner because their parents were like, "I'm sorry, I can't. The world's on fire."
Correct. And that, unfortunately, many of us that were making phone calls on behalf of political parties, we all expected November, early November, we'd be done with that.
Right.
And it ended up carrying through until mid-January.
It did.
Who knew?
Who knew?
But now, February, one of my favorite months ever. Like, how can you pack so much fun into the shortest month of the year?
Well, it's great also because every now and then it surprises you with a leap day. Extra day. How cool is that? I just lived a whole day longer.
And it's the month of love.
Yes.
It's a day, like one of the first days in February. You can just relive it over and over and over.
Groundhog Day, Black History Month.
Right. Now is the perfect time for us to redirect people's attention to Fund the Bat.
It is. So everyone knows, now one of the things about GoFundMe is there's GoFundMe and there's charity GoFundMe. And so if you go to GoFundMe and try and do Fund the Bat, its search engine is not very good. They will, I believe, say as much, and they're because those sort of take care of themselves. Usually a GoFundMe is my uncle needs this, my brother needs this, my cousin needs this, and larger charitable groups tend to go to the charity side. So it's charity.gofundme.com is where it's at. You can search from it there, and it's /Fund the Bat. It's also at YouTube as just Fund the Bat, and it has the GoFundMe URL listed underneath it. YouTube doesn't let you can't click on the link there, but it does have the address, so you can find it that way as well.
And I have also just done a very lazy Google search for Fund the Bat, and it's gotten me there.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So.
How do you do a lazy Google search?
A lazy Google search is kind of like this.
Just, yeah. You want to get a Minority Report where you can just go.
Right, exactly. Don't you need special glasses for that though? Don't you need the Google Glass?
Yeah, and special things on your fingers.
Right. What is your next deal? What are you excited about? What's up and coming? Obviously, we just had a good 15 minutes talking about COVID and the amount of need this industry is in, but I know writers and directors and executive producers like you always have multiple irons in varying degrees of fires.
That is, and I do. So as everyone, take some time to sort of, generate new material. And as the world starts to open up, or as we do Zoom pitches like this. So, just trying to get another show going. And if that doesn't go, trying to get another show going, because that's what we do. But, the world has gone through so much, and I think there's an opportunity for a whole bunch of new kind of stories to come out of this. And I think the political climate has also done that. So I've always tried to do shows where I thought it was a hero and not an anti-hero, a flawed person who got up and went to work every day. And that was true for, Mulder or the Vampire Angel on Angel, or Sidney Bristow, or anybody on S.H.I.E.L.D. So I do think stories that have hope in them are important, and I've always tried to work on shows that did that. And so I think a lot of people will be doing that as we go forward.
So I do have a couple more questions for you, if
Sure.
you have a little more time.
Sure.
But I do.
Where am I going to go?
Maybe you've got like 10 Zoom pitches set up.
I mean, I'm just here.
So David from Angel, David Boreanaz. Do you know what his dad did for a living?
I do.
Ties in with your first X-Files.
Pardon me?
It ties in with your first X-Files.
Yes. Now he was a weatherman, I think, in Philadelphia, I think.
That is correct.
Yes. He came and visited David one day on set. And I mean, it's sort of, George Clooney, similar. He had a father who was a newscaster in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I grew up in the Lehigh Valley, and I watched ABC 7. His dad gave us the weather report twice a day.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So, bit of a crush. Like.
Oh, look, on his dad or on David?
On his dad. I mean, David's fine. Yeah. Don't get me wrong.
David's had an amazing career. Holy cow.
Yes, he has.
I mean, just, he's a star. He's just amazing.
So the questions that we always wrap up with go a little something like this.
Okay.
What is your favorite film and why? What is your favorite television series and why? And we've added in 2021, what is your favorite genre and or director? We are doing this because we started compiling our pandemic film list.
Yes.
And we are the Motion Picture and Television Fund, so it seemed a little myopic to just ask about films.
Yes.
Why we expanded it. And we have been very fortunate that people who have joined us on the live broadcasts have a good time and want to come back. So we've expanded the questions for those who have been here a few times. So now it's a total of those 3 questions, and we may add to it if this insanity goes on for another 6 months.
Wow. Well, picking a favorite movie is always hard because is it Thursday and what did I have for lunch? Kind of depends on what's there. In terms of, I mean, honestly, there's the Singing in the Rain answer, there's the Annie Hall answer, there's the Blade Runner answer, there's the Third Man answer, there's the Tarkovsky, Andrei Rublev answer.
Are you familiar?
Sometimes it's just, A Night at the Opera, because I could watch that every time it comes on. So let's go with Night at the Opera.
I love that. And you're the first person that said A Night at the Opera.
Well, look at me, outlier.
No. But certainly if you were saying Casablanca,
Again, you can't argue with that choice.
Right. So do you know Billy Ray? Are you familiar with Billy Ray? So Billy has been on with us many, many times. And one of the last times he was on, it was literally going through his top 100 list.
Wow.
He's got, he knows it's not off the top of his head. It's all documented.
Right.
And the reasonings why.
Yes.
And occasionally he said he can be talked out of something on the list if you can make a valid argument for why another movie should replace it. And we kind of did that. There were a few movies that hadn't made his list before. So I would encourage you, you've just rattled off 25 great movies.
No, like 8 or so, but yeah.
Right. If you want to come back at some point and give us your reasoning for your top.
Well, that'd be great. Yes, I have, because people are always asking for a list of movies, and I always have lists of movies. So absolutely, that'd be fun.
Great. All right. TV series?
Look, I'm going to go with the X-Files just because it changed television. Suddenly, TV looked like movies, and it was dark, it was mysterious, and it had both mythology serialized and standalone. And I liked all of that. And it was so fundamental to me learning how to make television on top of that. There are lots of great shows that came before that and after it, but I'll go with that just as a formative experience.
Okay. One of the other questions I love to ask writers before we get to genre
Yeah.
is, what was it like for you the first time you heard in an authentic, real performance an actor say the words that you had created?
Oh, that it, you know, it's always because you know them as words that you wrote. It takes a while to realize, oh, they're just does it sound like they're talking, or does it sound like they're speaking your words? And the beautiful thing about X-Files, which is where this experience happened, I wrote a screenplay, right? I write the script, and it goes to the director, a guy named Kim Manners, who was one of the producer directors, one of the great directors that were there. And like 2 hours later, I get this phone call, and I go, "Oh no, it's Kim Manners," because it came up, and he goes, "Great script, buddy, great script. This is great script." And that, and then suddenly the art department was there saying, "Is this what you wanted?" And then you're in casting with the director, and then you're in all these concept meetings, and people are looking in television. The writer has a bit of a voice, not the director, but still it gets to because the writer's there for all of them, and the directors come and go. And it was just so much fun to be part of that process, and to be sitting next to the director on set and hearing that, and him looking and go, "You're good," and I'm going, "I'm good." It was magical. And especially the fact that it was David and Jillian, which were it was a show I loved, and so to be able to do that was pretty great.
Did you like when you were in Indiana, did you imagine the thrill would be what it was, or was the thrill greater than what you pictured as a kid?
It continues to be kind of greater. And look, I still love driving onto a set. I mean, to a lot. I have as I'm as thrilled pulling through the gate of a lot now as I was when I first did it 20 years ago. And it's that whole Pee-wee's Big Adventure of like people dressed like pirates and Indians and aliens sitting down at a table having lunch together as the fake wall goes by. I mean, that happens sometimes. When we were shooting Angel at Paramount, Star Trek was next door. And so we'd be outside having crew lunch, and Klingons are walking by as vampires are having lunch. I mean, that you never get tired of that.
Yeah.
I mean, not my screensaver, but my wallpaper still is the empty soundstage 16 at Culver, which is where our base was on S.H.I.E.L.D. And after everything was taken out and it was just the empty stage again, Jed and Marissa, who co-created it and ran it, Jed was up in the perms and took a picture of me standing down in the big empty set, and it's still my wallpaper because I just go, "Oh, I have so many great memories of this stupid empty box." I mean, to the point, to be a little fanboy, we had these amazing rigging grips on our show, and they live up in the perms. Their whole job is to make sure that everything is secure. And when they were done, they're like, "Do you want a tour?" And because they were surprised that we were interested, and they went up and they told us about other shows that had been there, and hanging thousands of pounds of this and showing where certain people had signed initials. It was such a like old Hollywood feeling moment. And so yeah, I 1,000 years later, I'm still as excited as I was when I was a kid.
So for MPTF, and as someone who's worked with this charity for coming on 20 years.
Wow.
It's
so you started elementary school.
Yeah, I was barely even speaking when I started at MPTF.
I understand.
The first thing that I did when I moved to Los Angeles was volunteer for MPTF because I wanted to plug into that history really quickly.
Right.
And I worked at Columbia. I worked in independent production. I still do my own independent production because working with the residents in these creative opportunities that we do with the television station, we want to be working peer to peer. And they only see me as a peer if I'm still doing stuff out on my own.
Right.
So one of the great conversations that I had early on was with a guy that was a prop master. He created the backpacks for Ghostbusters.
Fantastic.
And early in his career, he was the guy that had the fishing wire that, waved the tail of the Cowardly Lion.
Oh, spectacular.
And it's those stories. And you imagine him as a kid up in the catwalks, following along with the little fishing line, not knowing at that time that he was making any kind of, film history. It was
Right.
It was a gig that everyone got to play and have fun with.
Right.
And I love that you haven't lost that joy.
Haven't had it beat out of me yet. You'd think I would, but anyone in this business knows you take a beating to do it. But no, it's still great.
Okay, so then last question, your favorite genre?
Oh,
I'm glad that this isn't easy for you.
well, because there's so much, and how do you define genre? Are indie films genre? Are foreign films genre? Because I love independent film. I still do, and so I'll go with that. Because when you're looking on your Netflix queue, the way they break it up, they do break indie, and Apple, they do break indie film out as a category.
Yeah.
So I'll go there because I always feel like people are trying new stuff and they don't have a lot of money and they don't have to worry about necessarily a corporate machine saying you can't say bad things about this or that.
Yeah. And that is Napoleon Dynamite.
Oh, fantastic.
And No Man's Land.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great.
All right. I love it.
Me too.
Yeah, the indie film doesn't get nearly enough love.
I agree.
Jeff, thank you so much for all of your efforts, for raising money for this charity, for helping us celebrate the next 100 years of MPTF. Please come back, not just with your list of 25, but join us for Cinephiles, which is our panel discussion about films. Invite other people to come back with you, play game shows with us. I want you to be in our world.
Well, thank you. It's been great meeting you, and I really appreciate all the work you guys do. And I'll say it again, it's Fund the Bat. And if they want, it's at charity.gofundme.com, Fund the Bat, or just at YouTube, Fund the Bat. But thanks for your help in getting the word out.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.